Good day, and today we're going to look a little bit at the history between World Wars I and II, otherwise known as the Years of Crisis, 1919 to 1939. So when we look at this time period, we can start by the ideas of philosophy and society. For example, Freud would have said that believed that people were being irrational, that they are driven by unconscious drives at this time. And because you're being driven by something you don't understand, you're going to have a sense of an uncertain time. We also have existentialism becoming a major philosophy at this time, where there's no universal meaning to life, that each person creates their own meaning in life. Such that ideal of you need to seek out your own truth and your own individualized life is certainly going to lead to uncertainty. And we look at the art of the time period, surrealism is taking hold, where we're seeing this dreamlike quality that is beyond or above the sense of realities. There is a lot of uncertainty happening even with our own cultural and society backgrounds. At the same time, we are also seeing the sense of uncertainty when it comes to people wanting their rights, starting with what a woman's role in society is. By 1919, we start seeing women's suffrage being achieved in the US, Great Britain, Germany, Sweden, and Austria. And as we go through 1919 to 1939, we're starting to see the abandonment of restrictive clothing and hairstyles. Women are now going to find it normal and commonplace to be able to wear makeup, to drive cars, and now they're able to drink and smoke in public and walk right into a bar like other men. Now they also see increased working opportunities where they're not just stigmatized into certain working roles. And of course, with the incoming of birth control, a woman is now able to take control of every day of her life and maybe perhaps more working opportunities outside of the home. Our technologies during this time of uncertainty are also going to increase that sense of a smaller world. For example, medical treatments and drugs are going to profoundly change our life, even give us more longevity. The automobile is going to make the world physically smaller, as most people were living lives barely 50 miles from where they were born. Now the automobile is an easier way for the common man to get further than that. We also now start seeing airlines starting to be formed. The airplane was still just kind of a novelty up until this time, but by the time 1919 comes along, now we're starting to see common man being able to get on an airplane and fly elsewhere. Our entertainment as well, we start moving into the radio, the movies become in their golden age, jazz is the heyday of the day, and so with our entertainment, we're starting to get more of this sense of uncertainty because we don't know. Should we be like what we see in Hollywood? Should we be more like those characters we hear on the radio? Now, electricity that came in the late part of the 19th century, basically for the upper classes, by this point in time around 1919, is generally available to the general public. Now, electricity is going to bring on a lot more helper items around the house, which is going to allow for more leisure time. These inventions might include the washing machine, the electric refrigerator, the vacuum cleaner, the coffee pot, things that are going to make life quicker and more efficient and therefore a little bit easier of a time for humans. Now, also during this time, we're going to see a lot of instability when it comes to governments. There's going to be new European governments that are reestablished after World War I in 1919, and they don't seem to get a stable foundation. For example, Germany, who had seemed to lose the most in World War I, printed so much money that it became essentially worthless. You also see trade being diminished, first of all, because they needed to rebuild European country economic systems, and so therefore they don't have a lot to send out as trade. There's also going to be a call for reparations. Many countries owed money, particularly Germany, and you're also going to see, because of that, the economy is not really being able to stabilize themselves. The U.S. stock market crash in October of 1929 is going to lead into first the U.S. Great Depression and then a worldwide depression in the economy. And so when we look at the sense of unemployment as we start around the time of the stock market crash in October of 1929, you're going to see the percentage of the workforce in the United States, Great Britain, and Germany. There's this spike of unemployment. It does come down a bit as the years go by, but it still is at a very high percentage, even at the very beginning of World War II. For example, you can see with the United States, we're still in the 15 to 20% unemployed rate. Great Britain is not much better, around the 10 to 15%. The only place where it seems unemployment is getting better is in Germany. Now, Great Britain is going to slowly improve their economy by raising taxes and increasing tariffs. But unlike Germany, they also started regulating their currency and lowering interest rates. They wanted people to be confident in the pound again and to go out and to use their economy, go out and buy things. It also avoided political extremes and tried to maintain the democracy as an almost willing presence behind that economy. They needed to stabilize a sense of efficiency in both their economy and in politics. Now, France is going to fare better economically than most because they were still quite a bit of an agricultural economy. And because of that, France was largely self-sufficient and they had little need for foreign trade. However, at this time, they are going to notice some political instability. Multiple governments are going to form and then fall. So France is having a problem of their own. Now, towards the end of this time period, France is going to create a populist front in order to help their workers. Now, it's not long-lasting, but it does hold on to a sense of democracy as it goes into World War II. Now, Scandinavian countries fared much better coming out of World War I, simply because they had already had established a socialist government. They were very quickly able to raise taxes, increase pensions and unemployment benefits to their people, and even subsidize housing. However, along with the socialist government, they still have a sense of democracy intact. Their people are still able to vote. The people are still able to have a sense of talking to their government and being able to have a say. Now, in the United States, after the Great Depression, you see FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, coming into as a president, and his New Deal is going to start stabilizing the United States economy. For example, the public works projects for the unemployed are not only going to give employment to people who are having a hard time finding jobs and stabilizing them, but you're also going to start stabilizing the economy by creating great public roads, by creating different types of federal government buildings in order for people to go and get what they need from their unemployment. There's going to be aids to businesses and farms who are having problems being able to afford to even run. And there's going to be relief programs for people who may have lost their farms, people who are still unemployed. And of course, regulations for the banks and the stock exchange that kind of led to the downfall of the U.S. economy in the first place. And throughout it all, despite having Republican and Democratic presidents and Republican and Democratic Congresses, democracy is maintained throughout. However, in other countries, you are not going to see democracy being maintained. For example, in a totalitarian country, individual rights are not viewed as important as the needs of the nation. And so we see some of these dictatorships starting to take hold. For example, the communist dictatorship in Russia with the rise of Stalin, the military dictatorship in Japan, and then a fascist dictatorship in both Germany and military, where a military government which is based on nationalism and perhaps racism has a strong support from the business community. So when we take a look at Italy, starting in 1919 and moving on, their unemployment and inflation were both high. And so because of that, people were turning to the government looking for a strong leader. With the entrance of fascism, a militant political movement that emphasizes loyalty to the state and obedience to that one leader, you're going to see a dictatorial rule, where they're going to say that each class has its own place in society, and depending upon which class you're in, it's going to deny individual rights. Now, we do see Mussolini coming into power as a dictator, and he promised to rescue Italy by reviving its economy and rebuilding its army. And by 1922, Mussolini is in full power. So he's going to start by eliminating other political parties. Any kind of voices of dissent were immediately gotten rid of. He's also going to curb the freedom of the press. Once again, we don't want to have people who might speak out against him. Because of that, he's also now going to have the power to outlaw free speech and association. Because he has the backing of the businesses, he's going to help them by crushing labor unions, and he's going to prohibit strikes. This allies him now with businesses and landlord interests. There also is a sense of racism that comes along with fascism, which labels Jews unpatriotic and bans them from government employment. Now, Mussolini may have done many brutal and tyrannical things, and he may have destroyed human freedom in Italy, and he may have murdered and tortured citizens whose only crime was to oppose Mussolini. But he did admit that he had one thing, and that was that he made the trains run on time. Now, in Germany, you're going to have the National Socialist German Workers' Party, also known as the Nazi Party. Their goal is to overturn the Treaty of Versailles that was signed in World War I, and they also wanted to combat the communism that was starting to slowly come in from the east, from Russia. Now, Hitler joins this party in 1919. Now, he decided he wanted to be one of those who was going to be in power, and he's arrested and jailed in an attempt of his seizing power. And while he's in jail, he writes Mein Kampf, and he outlines his goal for an Aryan nation, a master race, and to regain lands and to decrease the population. Now, when the U.S. aid stops in the 1920s, he's going to gain some power, because at the time, the German economy is going to collapse. He doesn't become into full power until 1932 when he becomes Chancellor of Germany, and at that time, just like Mussolini, you're going to see a totalitarian state. Now, if there's anybody who's going to speak out against him, if there's anybody who's going to be putting out press against him, he now has established the SS, where they're going to arrest and murder any political enemies he might have. At the same time, because he's in charge of everything, he's going to successfully boost their economy and decrease the unemployment. And one of the ways that he does this is to begin an attack on non-Aryans. If you can get rid of some of those people, you can have other people coming in and using their businesses, their homes, and all of a sudden, since they're not counted in the unemployment rolls, unemployment is going to go down. Now, in July of 1932, the Nazi Party won 37.3% of the vote for parliament and became the largest party in the Reichstag. The Communist Party also did well, and fear of communism is going to reinforce Hitler's appeal to try and rid them from the Reichstag. So when he becomes Chancellor in 1933, Hitler has the sway of most of the German people behind him. Now, once he's Chancellor, Hitler declares a national state of emergency, which means he has now ways to eliminate all opposition. He does so by first outlawing all other political parties and made the National Socialist Party, the Nazis, the only legal party in Germany. He also replaces the original federal structure of the German nation with a highly centralized state. He eliminates trade unions and collective bargaining. He prohibits strikes and lockouts, and he takes control of all police forces in Germany. And of course, we start seeing then other countries kind of doing the same thing that Italy and Germany had. Hungary, Poland, Yugoslavia, Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, Argentina, all of these countries during this time of uncertainty are going to also fall to dictatorships. Now, in Japan, it's a little bit of a different dictatorship. At the time in 1919, they were politically democratic. The armed forces are under their own control. But then Hirohito comes in as emperor, and he comes in with the support of the military. So with the support of the military behind the emperor, they sought to create an empire. They're going to start creating an imperialistic notion. So, in 1930, Japan invades China's Manchuria, contrary to the treaty Japan and China had at the time. And in 1937, Japan has now taken northern Chinese cities of Beijing and Nanjing. Now, the League of Nations, who did not like what was happening, kind of stood by. They were now powerless to just come in and invade Japan and China. They knew that they did not want World War I happening all over again. So even though they strongly worded against what was happening, they didn't become involved. At the same time, Mussolini decides to go and attack Ethiopia, getting his own sense of imperialism. And the League of Nations failed once again. They did nothing. There were strong words against what Mussolini did, but the League of Nations didn't react. And now Germany has decided to be an imperialist as well, and they entered the Rhineland. It's an industrial area. It's a buffer between Germany and France that was protected by the Treaty of Versailles. The League of Nations didn't do anything, so Germany then decides to take Austria and Czechoslovakia's Sudetenland into their German Empire. And the League of Nations still allowed this. They called it an appeasement. Maybe if we give in to an aggressor, we can avoid the war. Unfortunately, it dealt with the opposite. This is now going to increase Hitler's power and confidence. So we talk about the Rhineland. Where is that? Well, it was a piece of land between France and Germany that after World War I, just a very industrial area, was separate from both France and Germany. Germany decided it needed it, so it took it. Now, the Sudetenland is over on the other side of Germany, and you can see once again we have all of this river land, a very agricultural land at the time, very fertile lands, and Germany wanted it as well. So now that we start seeing Italy, Germany, and Japan having this sense of imperialism, they form an alliance called the Axis powers. They have a lot in common. So Hitler and Mussolini helped Franco gain fascist rule in Spain, so now you're starting to see this imperialist fascist notion grow. Now, Spain remained non-belligerent in World War II, but it did help supply the Axis powers. And as all this is happening in the 1930s, the U.S. is going to maintain isolationism. They did that at the start of World War I. They only had to come in the last year or so in order to try and help out with World War I. So the U.S. again thought, well, we'll stay out of this. And that is your years of uncertainty. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you'd like me to continue on and start talking about the causes of World War II, maybe go into some of the battles of World War II, or if you'd like to learn more about this time of uncertainty with other nations, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what more you'd like to learn. And as always, thanks for stopping by.